Hi, I'm Em,
And my name is B.
and this is
Fangirls Anonymous. A quick warning, this podcast is not for kids.
We get into some pretty explicit stuff.
But if you're still with us and into that, welcome.
Hi, B, how's it going?
Hey, Em, it is going great. How about you?
I'm good. I did a bunch of research this week for this episode, and I can't wait to share it. I really can't.
I'm excited to learn more about this because I know some, but I do not think that I know nearly as much as you do at this point. So
I didn't know anything. I thought I knew a little bit about fanzines or fanzines. Just heads up, I will be making that mistake throughout the episode because I grew up with Zine in my head and mouth. But I thought I knew a whole bunch about it, but I really didn't at all. I didn't know anything. So if you're in the same boat, welcome. This is Fangirls Anonymous. And we're talking about fanzines.
Well, I guess we should start off with what even is a zine?
Well, on fanlore.org, it is defined as usually a collection of fan fiction stories that are often edited and then distributed to people around the world like a magazine. And like physical stuff, like not like online stuff.
Just to backtrack so we don't miss the opportunity we've created here. The reason that they're called zines is because they are like a magazine. It's a shortening. So instead of a portmanteau where we sort of smush things together, now we're just chopping it off and getting rid of the first half.
Fandoms love either chopping it off or smushing it together. I personally need to apologize. I will be saying Zine because I grew up with Zine and it is zine, and I'm sorry. But I have been saying it that way for almost 9 years now, so I cannot change it. I will try my darndest, but if I do say Zine, just realize that it's zine. And if you say Zine, welcome to the club. It's okay. Everything's fine. So, Zines or zines are really old. So there were these amateur magazines that came out in like the 1890s that people correlate zines to, which is really old, like way older than I thought. But the original group of people who are really into one subject kind of magazines that were not professionally published, they come from the 30s, and they were about science fiction. The first printed fanzine, which everybody at the time called fan mags, which, why don't we call them fan mags? That should be the name.
It's got a certain je ne sais quoi.
Yeah.
It also feels like some small child in a newsy cap should be on the street corner selling them for a nickel, so,
In the 1890s, and that's what they should have been doing. But yeah, the fan mags to me, though, is actually a much better name because then we wouldn't have to worry about this whole zine bullshit. But the first fan mag was called The Comet, and it was published in 1930 by Raymond Arthur Palmer, and it was released by the Science Correspondence Club in Chicago. I just thought that was really neat.
I want to join a Science Correspondence Club.
I'm sure it still exists. That sounds like something that Chicago would hold on with its dead hands kind of club, But those magazines contained fiction, science fiction, but also factual articles on science fiction and meta discussions on science fiction. Sounds very fandomy to me. But there were also other types of fan mags or fanzines. In the punk scene in the 60s and 70s, there were quite a few fanzines, and Riot Girls in the 90s would release explicitly feminist zines, which fuck yeah, that's super cool. Love it. But yeah, so the first fanzine that we would consider a fanzine about a piece of media, a group of people really loving a piece of media and then wanting to have a magazine about it, basically.
So not just necessarily amateur press, but specifically a fandom oriented sort of
Yes.
Interesting.
The first one that was a group of people who really loved a piece of media and wanted to talk to each other about it through a magazine and through print was the Baker Street Journal, and it was about Sherlock Holmes. Apparently the first edition came out in 1946. That is so old! I truly thought that fanzines came out in the 60s with Spock and Kirk, but when you only get your information about fanzines from Dan Howell on YouTube, that's what you're gonna know. If you actually look into it, it's much older. Another notch in the history of fanzines would be Lennon Lyrics. It's published from 1965 to 1968, and it was a fanzine about John Lennon.
So you're
Yeah.
saying one of the first fanzines was RPF?
Well, it says on fanlore.org that it was a fanzine that updated its readers on like John's work with the Beatles and also like independent work that he did. But I highly doubt that that was the only thing that they were talking about.
I don't think I have ever been infatuated enough with any single human being on the face of this planet to print and distribute a magazine devoted to whatever was going on in their lives.
Yeah, no, same, definitely. We're not RPF shippers at all. But you have to consider the time. It was the 60s. Nobody had anything goddamn going on.
Well, they had the civil rights movement, let us not forget.
Very, very true. I don't want to discount that. But other than that, what else were the people doing in the 60s like to have fun? Maybe go see a movie, go see some Beatles movies. Oh, I really love these people. Oh, I really want to write fan fiction about these people. Oh, let's make a magazine.
I'm pretty sure there's probably a Beach Boys song that explains what people were doing in the 60s.
Were they having good vibrations?
I don't know, but I feel like there's probably the song out there that explains it.
Good, 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 good vibrations. Okay, that's an amazing song, by the way. Nobody can say otherwise. So, okay, let's get to the part that I always considered the start of fanzines, and I was terribly wrong. Star Trek fanzines. They were crazy. So, they're kind of the most well-known fanzine of yesteryear, at least on the internet. If you grew up today and read a lot of fanfic, you're just kind of aware that a lot of fanzines existed about Spirk. Like, that was the way people read Spirk fanfiction growing up in the 60s. Like, your grandmas have Spirk fanfiction magazines in their attics right now, kind of thing.
There was a lot of other stuff going on too, because there were so many tropes that came out of just the distribution of fan fiction in the 60s, like
Mpreg!
Sex pollen.
Yes, Sex pollen, Mpreg, all of that shit came out from that Spirk fanzine culture.
I feel like we should say that it was Star Trek fanzines, because Spirk was not universal even then.
No, it is kind of now. But
I mean, there's a reason that the Mary Sue exists, and it's because there were a fair number of women that were created by the fans for Kirk to fall in love with.
They did not call them Mary Sues at the time. Mary Sue's actually kind of a newer term, but yes, definitely. There are some Mary Sues even in the newer films that for Kirk to fall in love with. It's ridiculous. You have Zachary Quinto right there. Anyway, I think of Star Trek as kind of the growing grounds for what people consider as fan magazines today. It kind of was. They had 163 documented Star Trek specific fanzines around the world.
Those are the documented ones?
Yeah. I mean, that's on fanlore.org. There could have been way more. We don't know.
There probably were, because think of all of the little, like, you drew it out by hand and distributed it to all of your friends in the neighborhood sort of thing.
My father literally drew out a newspaper, like a full-ass newspaper for his, like, I think it was like a 6th grade class when the last Star Wars movie came out in the 80s, like 83. And, like, all so that people knew what times the Star Wars movie was coming out. But they like made like funny little articles about Star Wars, and like it was a whole newspaper. Imagine that multiplied by thousands with young girls talking about their favorite fandoms with Spock and Kirk.
Or
basically.
Honestly, not even just young girls, like housewives.
Yeah, no, totally. Housewives completely changed the shape of fandom by mailing each other stories. It's amazing. Not only were all of these Star Trek specific fanzines in the United States, but there were a lot of them in the world. So there was Brazil, Germany, the US obviously, Australia, the UK, and can you believe it, Russia. There's a Star Trek fanzine from 2017 in Russia. All about Spirk. It wasn't even just Star Trek stuff. It was literally about two guys romantically being together in Russia.
I mean, considering the laws that are still on the books about queer relationship, that's a bold statement. Like, hat tip to them.
Yeah, I mean, that's Star Trek kind of in a little bit of a nutshell when it comes to the fanzine, like, history. But yeah, I think it's crazy that so many people were doing that for decades. Like, since the 60s and until probably about like the early 2000s, so many magazines were being shipped out to people. Like, it's crazy. I just wanted to give a little note on some fanzine etiquette that I found online. that I think is amazing, and I kind of wish it could be brought back just for this. So some people who were really into fandom would get a fanzine in their mail without even knowing that it was coming. Like they hadn't subscribed to that fanzine or anything, and they had no idea. And there was a written note with the fanzine telling them why they specifically, that person, was getting that fanzine. And the customary thing to do was to send a thank you note back to the people who sent it to you, saying not only that you received the design, but also why you enjoyed it, what you enjoyed about it. And these little notes were called returns. And these returns were printed on the next design, on the next edition of this zine. And it was a way for people to get feedback about their ships, their fan art, their fan fiction. It was really cool. And it was basically a comment section before comment sections online.
It's interesting that you talk about that, because I've read that as things sort of moved more online, that idea of feedback and commentary did translate, but it translated kind of oddly, because there was and still is a huge debate in fandom about Concrit, and the idea of sending a return, which was sometimes considered a form of Concrit, it kind of got folded into early internet fandom where they were sending emails and things, and it was like, is the etiquette that we send them, you know, a thank you and feedback or not? How do people appreciate that? Because in the internet, you know, sometimes it's drinking from a fire hose instead of getting the one or two people that you specifically sent your fic out to, and then you get criticism back from. Suddenly this fic is out here for everybody to see, and you can be inundated with commentary. But it's interesting to note that etiquette didn't just disappear in the internet age. It actually had this funky transition period.
For people listening, Concrit is constructive criticism, which I don't tend to find when I'm reading comments on AO3. Everybody's always just like, oh my god, it was so amazing, this is so cool, oh my god, I love this part. You know, it's never constructive criticism. And if it is, people don't like it. That is one thing I don't necessarily like about fandom sometimes. It tends to be a lot of love bombing, or it's nothing at all. I think Concrit is good. So I found this interesting list, which I think could be a list to describe just fan fiction in general. These are some reasons why fans create and consume fanzines. 1, for the joy and satisfaction of creating something to share and for the fun. 2, to fill in gaps in canon narratives and to fix what they consider other unsatisfactory errors or oversights in canon and characterization. 3, as responses to other fan works. 4, a way to include things they wish could be included but can't be shown due to censorship or societal norms, such as sexual and other intimate relationships and gender exploration. 5, to interact with other fans. 6, as a training ground for professional writing. I don't agree with that. And 7, as a way of taking back power, refusing to be passive consumers. I fucking love number 7. I love that so much. That is so cool.
I love the idea that we've been sort of spoiled, I guess, in this age with our ability to interact with media and with creators and sort of reach out and be an active part of whatever fandom we're in. But I love the idea that urge has always been there, that they're like, hey, we want to be part of what's going on, and we're going to find a way to do that, especially when it wasn't so easy.
And if you've listened to our episode about Your Ancestors Liked Fic Too, I feel like that's totally what people did at the same time, like in like the 1700s and 1800s about their favorite novels, you know? People did that even back then too, but this is just a more pervasive way. I also found this absolutely amazing thing written in the year that I was born in 1997. I feel like what I'm about to read to you that I found on fanlore.org is a great example of what, at least what I feel like, is a good example of what the whole culture surrounding fanzines was back then. Let me just read this to you. For all of you who've been having trouble dealing with the absence of a rudely cancelled favorite TV series, we introduce the faithful alliance of nostalgic zealots indulging in novel endeavors, or fanzine. It's a satisfying alternative to syndication scheduling frustration. No more TV guide, no more preempting for news bulletins or sports. Nothing to disappoint or confuse. It's always right there when you want it. No more racing home so you don't miss your show, and no more missing out completely if you cannot make it home. Take it with you. Just pick one up wherever you are, and immediately you are immersed in your favorite series. No pesky commercials either, or lost key moments when the phone or doorbell rings. You can always start up right where you left off. An added bonus is that you can select what material you wish to experience on any given day, instead of being a captive audience of the network program managers. Pick what you want. Don't be a slave to someone else's scheduling whims any longer. And finally, unlike your canceled series, the publication of Fanzine products is alive and well. There is fresh material in every one. Can you remember the excitement when you didn't already know what was going to happen next? You can experience the thrill of anticipation again and again, thanks to the primary Fanzine product component, fictional amateur narratives of fabulously innovative caliber, or fanfic. It's one dream come true. I absolutely adore that.
That's really cute, actually, how excited they are and how
Yeah,
much
they're so earnest.
I mean, it's a great way to boil down what a lot of fanfic is about in general, but in specific, like having a physical piece that you can have with you that really isn't subject to anybody else but you or whatever disasters may befall. Because like we talked about in our episode on archiving, you don't always have full control over the media or the fanfic you consume. And so, I mean, personally, the thing that I sort of retroactively miss, having never really experienced the Zine era, is that I would love to be able to physically hold some of these things and you know,
Yes.
slip it away in the back of my closet and have it as my own little treasured thing that,
Yeah.
you know, 10 years down the line I can pick up and hey, word for word, there it is. So it's just lovely to know that in 1997 there were people who are like, hey, you're missing your media and you want something that is yours to keep. Here it is. We produce it.
Yeah, if you have a physical copy of something, like, somebody would have to take it away from you physically. You know, it's not like somebody just decided to take away all of your fic because it's about something that they don't like. And it happens to be online, and it happens to be something that they have access to. I do also wish that fanzines were more of a thing, because a lot of them today generally tend to be about art only, and that's great. Fan art is the shit, but I would love to read some of my favorite fic in physical form. One of my favorite things to do is read books physically. I don't like audiobooks, hilariously, said the podcaster. But like, I would just be so happy to sit in my reading chair and read a really good Omens fic. A really good Omens fic. That sounds like a dream. Unless I decide to print it out myself and then bind it myself, like, it's not going to happen. There was a golden era of fanzines, and sometimes I wish I could have been part of it. But then again, there's way less choice than we have today. So it's like, grass is greener on the other side, really.
Yeah. On the one hand, you get a physical copy. On the other hand, you get whatever you're given, and if you hate it, you're sorry. That's one of the limited number of fics you can put in the zine in the first place.
Then again, it was also kind of touted as a curated form of fic. So if you knew that the people who were choosing the fic that was going to go into the fanzine had good taste, then you could usually be assured that what you were going to read was going to be good. And that kind of sounds nice, you know, not having to roam the vast hallways of AO3 trying to find a good fic in the top kudo section of your fandom. I really want to get my hands on a zine now. I really want to go to Iowa now, to the University of Iowa, and look at all of their physical copies of fandom media, because they do have a place there. I think we talked about it in our last episode.
Yeah, they have a physical archive of fan-related works that they curate. Okay,
so a different tangent now. If you guys are listening to this and you're thinking, this kind of sounds like Dunshinshi, it is kind of like Dunshinshi. There are some similarities, but there are some differences. Both came around the same time, actually, which is kind of neat.
Interesting.
Both are fan-made, physical printed objects about fandoms, and both are female-dominated printed objects that feature a lot of M/M fan works. I think that that's a lot of similarities. But
Yeah.
doujinshi is from Japan, and a lot of them tend to be manga. They're much more likely to be manga or art books since the beginning, and that wasn't necessarily what happened with fanzines that weren't doujinshi. But fun little fact, shi is the kanji for magazine in Japanese, and that's where zine comes from, or zine comes from.
I also think that it's worth noting that culturally, zines and doujinshi sort of occupy different spaces, because as we have been slowly winding our way towards, zines are not common anymore.
No, they're
I
not.
can't think of a single person who is in the last 10 years received an actual physical zine that wasn't part of some other larger community based project.
Well, I mean, there are zines that still exist that you can get, that you do get physically. You buy physically and it's sent to you physically. It's like a little book, but it's full of art. It's like art of one artist that does fan art, or art that everybody conglomerated together. And it's like, it's really high caliber for your art to be in these books, because it's almost published books, but it's like about characters that people have rights to that you don't have, so it's like different anyway.
And a lot of times they also are part of like a charity drive or something. But doujinshi are still fairly common from what I understand in Japan, and easy to get your hands on. Like, I'm pretty sure that there are bookstores that you can go in and buy them. So it's almost its own industry. So they do occupy sort of different statuses.
You know, Japan must have just such different rules and regulations regarding copyright. Because these books that we're talking about have copyrighted characters in them. It's just a known quantity. It's like, yeah, people are gonna make some money off of these books, but it's pittance compared to what the actual artists get.
I think there's also a different culture among the creators, because from what I understand, creators, actual mangaka, also contribute to these. So,
oh my gosh, that is so fucking cool. Why don't we have that?
Anarchy.
Capitalism. But yeah, so we got into some art. They're called art books, basically, in the United States now. They're not necessarily fanzines anymore. They're also called art zines.
It's sort of a 50-50 split. I've seen it both ways.
I see a lot of these in the Good Omens fandom and in the Clans fandom, the Voltron fandom.
I've seen it in Ladybug, Miraculous Ladybug fandom.
Oh, I haven't. That's cool. That's really cool. But those tend to be fandoms that we are in. So it's like, I'm sure that they're in lots of other fandoms too. But I just happen to see them a lot. I see so many Good Omens art zines, and so many good, they still call them fanzines online as well. But like, I see so many of them on my dash. A lot of them are tied to a charity. I think that's cool too. But yeah, I found this quote: "The professional level of production of these art books means many of these zines have rigorous application processes, often with hundreds of artists competing for a few dozen spots in the finished booklet. With the growing acceptance of fandom activities in the mainstream, art zine curators and contributors often view their participation in zine creation as something to include on resumes and portfolios for future jobs." That's bananas.
Which is a really interesting little quirky difference, I think, in the fan art versus the fan fiction culture. It's interesting because as a fic writer, I personally would never put that on a resume, nor would I ever hint that that's something I had done. So, and as a writer, it's not standard, a well accepted practice that if you are trying to, go official, that you take down your fan works if they're under your own name. So that's a huge difference, and something that is worth talking about.
Yeah, definitely. There are some recent fanzines that I wanted to get into since I got into some older ones. So there have been 11 Good Omen zines, which I guess I've seen a fair few of them on my Tumblr dash. Some of them are called pretty funny things. One's titled "It's Ineffable!" with an exclamation point. I think that's, if you know anything about Good Omens, it's really cute. Another one is "The Point is Dolphins." Also hilarious joke if you know Good Omens. And another one is called "Someone Will Remember Us," which I absolutely remember seeing on my dash. It's an art zine about Crowley and Aziraphale as women, if they were canonically women, like if they were in the past and like were romantically together, sexually together as women. I think that's really cool. I'm pretty sure that was also associated with a charity. But yeah, and then just a couple others. 14 Mad Max zines, and there are even a couple of Miraculous Ladybug zines, just like you said earlier. There have been 8 Miraculous Ladybug zines. I think that's great. I'm getting better at saying zine and not zine. There is a little bit of controversy surrounding zines.
So the controversy centers primarily around the fact that, so you've printed it out, fine, you've bound it and are distributing it, okay, but you're also selling it. And the controversy centers mainly around the fact, should you be profiting from it? Because the idea is essentially that there's no particular impetus on the printer's part to distribute those funds to the authors, or if there is it really enough for the authors to want to contribute? And in the case of more recent ones, artists and so on, like, should you be paid at all for the art that you do? So it's sort of a thorny issue, especially when you consider that there is a certain amount of material cost that goes into making the thing in the first place. So on the one hand, is it right for them to profit off of it, especially if they're not going to perhaps distribute those profits to the contributors of the actual, art or fiction? And or is it not right for them to be paid in order to reimburse them for their materials, if not their time? It's complicated, which is why a lot of the art books and so on, besides being sort of a hot commodity in terms of who gets to be in one, a lot of the time they are sold and the profits are sent to a charity, because that does sort of sidestep the issue.
Yeah, we have opinions on that, and we're planning on doing an episode at least about this subject when it comes to money and fanfic or fandom in general. Okay, we finished it off with another promise we'll do an episode line.
Yeah, we stay tuned because we got a lot coming up just from this.
Seriously. Okay, Rec Corner! So I am wrecking a fic called True As It Can Be. By the way, both of our recs are not in any way having to do with fanzines. And that's okay, because fanzines are a different thing. I mean, mine is of Supernatural, and there's a lot of Supernatural fanzines out there if you want to find them, but oh my gosh, fanzines. True As It Can Be by Welvin Wings, who also wrote Castle on a Cloud, which is a fic that I talked about in a past episode. Anyway, True As It Can Be is a really cute fic, written and published and completed in 2017 on AO3. It is about, okay, so it's like, what if Destiel was Beauty and the Beast? And I'll leave it at that.
My rec is from the Harry Potter fandom, which is also a fairly old fandom, and I'm sure that zines exist. I personally don't know anything about them, so I'd love to hear more about it from somebody who does. Mine is actually a fairly new one, so I'm pretty sure it's never been in a zine. It's called Notes on a Resurrection by New Leaves. The story is that it's after the war, and unspeakable Draco Malfoy, accidentally in the course of his duties, experimenting and trying to understand the Veil of Death, pulls one James Potter back from death. And so on it goes. It's nominally a story about Draco sort of pulling a miracle out of thin air, but it's also very much about Draco's relationship with Harry and how they've kind of survived and grown into themselves after the war. It's in turns sort of funny and tragic, and it's a really interesting character study, and it also just has a lot of fun ships in it that I found it quite enjoyable. So I don't want to spoil it because there are a couple of twists and turns.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. I really need to read it. Okay, I think we're done.
I guess we'll see y'all next week
on Fangirls Anonymous. Bye!